Now I want y'all to listen to this retarded bullshit. Listen to this shit. This shit goes against all academia, and this guy think he's fucking smart. Listen to this bullshit.
Share screen up. I'm gonna get my share screen up. I won't be doing any hooping and hollering and yelling. You want Ngozi? I mean, do you want Kansu to say something before you get started? Yeah, Kansu more than welcome to speak whenever he's ready. Brother Kansu.
Yeah, this is light work. This ain't really anything that we have to stretch for, because this is what we designed to do.
Yeah, this is a walk in the park, huh?
Yes, right,
right. All right. So all right, you up and running, Chris. All right. So with that being said, I'm calling this game over. Hebrews, stop the lies. What we're going to be dealing with is the Portuguese inception and invasion of Africa. And we're going to be dealing with a lot of the terms that the Hebrew Israelites tend to gloss over or tell us in order to keep us confused with who these mulattoes, mestizos, Luso-Africans are. There is an apparent history of their interaction with us in along the west coast of Africa that predates that of the Alhambra Decree. Now, I want to tell everybody this. There's going to be a lot of information that I have to hold back on for future debates here on this platform. When I say future debates, I mean future slaughterings, because ain't nobody messing with me at this thing right here. So with that being said, I want to go to my first slide here, and I'm going to get started. Right? So we want to deal with what a mulatto is, all right? Because we see them go into these books and they're not quite understanding or comprehending what it is that they're reading, all right? Now, guys, just follow me. Sometimes it gets boring, but this is going to be fun in the end, and I promise you that you guys' eyes are going to be open, okay? Now, a mulatto is a racial classification to refer to people of mixed African and white European ancestry. The English term and spelling mulatto is derived from the Spanish and Portuguese mulatto. It was a common term in the southeastern United States during the era of slavery. Some sources suggest that it may derive from the Portuguese word mula, meaning mule, the hybrid offspring of a horse and a donkey. The real Academia Española traces its origin to mulo in the sense of hybridity, originally used to refer to any mixed race person. The term is now generally considered outdated and offensive in non-Spanish speaking countries and was considered offensive even in the 19th century. Now, Jack D. Forbes suggested originated in the Arabic term muliwad or muwad, which means a person of mixed ancestry. Now, mawalad literally means, quote, born, begotten, produced, generated, or brought up, with the implication of being born and raised amongst Arabs, but not of Arab blood. Check it out, y'all. Mulwad is derived from the root walad, which is Arabic direct Arabic translation, and colloquial Arabic pronunciation can vary greatly. Walad means descent, offspring, scion, child, son, boy, young animal, or young one. Now, in Al-Andalus, Muliwad referred to the offspring of non-Arab/Muslim people who adopted the Islamic religion and manners. Specifically, the term was historically applied to the descendants of indigenous culture and religion. Christian Iberians who, after several generations of living among a Muslim majority, adopted their culture and religion. Notable examples of this category include the famous Muslim scholar Ibn Hazm. According to Lisan al-Arab, one of the earliest Arab dictionaries, applied the term to the children of non-Muslim slaves or non-Muslim children who were captured in a war and were raised by Muslims to follow their religion and culture. Thus, in this context, the term muwalad has a meaning close to, quote, the adopted, end quote. Now, according to the same source, the term does not denote being of mixed race, but rather being of a foreign blood and local culture. Now, this comes from the book Africans and Native Americans, The Language of Race and Evolution of Red Black Peoples, University of Illinois Press, page 145. Y'all go check that out. That's an interesting article. Now we're going to deal with the mysticos here, because all of these terms, they're going to come around. You guys are going to see how the Hebrews use them to confuse us because they're on the wrong side of history, and you're going to see how they're used in their proper context within history. This is very key here. This doesn't take a long time to understand here, and I want to get Sonetta to open up the phone calls, and hopefully we can have a discourse on this Friday, right? Before that Great debate that's going to happen tomorrow. So, a mestizo in colonial Brazil was initially used to refer to the Mamelucos, who were persons born from a couple in which one was an indigenous American and the other a European. It
Here
literally
go the
translates
bullshit.
as Mameluke, end quote, probably referring to the common Iberian comparisons of swarthy people to North Africans.
Now there goes the bullshit. That's the bullshit right there. That's the bullshit right there. See, he said that in colonial Brazil was initially used to refer to Mamalicos. He said mesticos is used in Brazil. Okay, but see the problem with that is the word Mameluke is an Arabic word. Okay, and it deals with Islam. Okay, and it's not a Brazilian word. It's not a what's that a Toyano or whatever the hell they call it, or any of those people that was a part of the indigenous Americas, the word Mumlok is not their word. So if they took the word of the Arabs and took this word to mean something other than what the Arabs intended for it to mean, and this is quite what they did, okay, because the word Mumlok is not a European word. It is not a Western American word. It's not a Western indigenous word. Okay, neither is the word Mysticos. So the Latins, the Latin adoption of this word Mumlicos is ridiculous in order for it to mean dark skinned people because during the time of the Mumluks, which were Turks, they were Turkish people. Turkish people have never been black, white, black, haven't been black since the fall of the at the battle of after the battle of Kadesh, after the fall of the Hittite Empire. Okay, certainly after Islam, that place has had all types of people up in there, and you just cannot say that people from Turkey are black people. There's nothing in history to support this. This here document right here has no. This is what I mean by his documents having no particular references to it. So when you have here an indigenous American and the other European that's mixed. You know what I'm saying? And the Brazilians calling them a term that's not even a part of their system. Then now the terms are false cognates. The terms are not cognitive, and that's the problem here. He's trying to make this term as if though this term alone word is cognate and it's not. Okay, he's saying it's probably referred. It says probability. Now this is not in reality. He said in probability it was referring to the common Iberian comparisons of swarthy people to North Africans. Okay, so basically he's saying that this is probably used in comparison to Iberian swarthy, meaning dark or brown or black people, to North Africans, okay, which were also tawny and swarthy. So they are comparing two dark or two black skinned people together, tanned but also dark colored or dark haired humans. See, or from Moor or Moroccos. So therefore, this term Mumluk in its original form, I'm going to show you, does not mean dark people, and it never ever meant dark people, because when the Arabs used it in their languages, and no, not even in European culture, not even in the Mexican, the Latino culture, or the American culture, has it ever been looked at as Turks being or Mumluks being a black people. Okay, the Mumluks were a Caucasian and a European people, and I'm going to prove that.
I.e., Moreno, tawny, swarthy, or tan, but also dark colored or dark haired human from Muro or Moor. You guys see how these terms are starting to, y'all starting to see it now?
Not really.
Now, in Brazil, the word mestiço was substituted for pardo. In the 1890 census, alongside
So was Mestucos substituted for Pardo, or was it substituted for Mumlicos? Because we need to know, how does Mumlicos mean black people, dark people, or tawny people? Okay, the Arabic word. We want to know, how did this Arabic word amongst Brazilians come to mean a dark people? That's what we need to know.
Cob Oclo, which means brown, but then returned to Pardo in subsequent censuses. The term was used and is used to describe individuals born from any mixture of different ethnicities. Mainly, these individuals usually have a blend in African, Native American, and European Caucasian. There are specific groups like
Well, we're going to get none of that out of the word Mumalok. Watch.
European slash Portuguese and Native American parents are commonly known as Caboloco or Caboloco. I cannot pronounce the word correctly. If somebody knows how to pronounce it, please let me know. Or more commonly in the past, Mamaluco. We just read about that word. Individuals of European and African ancestry are described as mulatto. Cafuzos, known as Zombo in English language, are the production of Native American and African ancestors.
Bullshit.
If someone has a mix of all three, they are known as Pardo. Now, why I'm showing
Don't
this
nobody
is because
use
you
those
guys
words.
see this Hebrew Israelite.
No, but Hebrew Israelites don't use this word. Don't nobody in academia use these words. Don't nobody use these words in colloquial English. Why in the fuck is you bringing this stupid shit up, Chris?
Chart, and they like, some of them, not all of them, like to include the Native Americans, and you're going to find out why. The Portuguese are the key. Let's deal with the Mesticos in Angola. It don't get no blacker than Angola. Now, the Mestico are primarily of mixed European, native-born indigenous Angolan, or other indigenous African lineages. They tend to be Portuguese culturally and have full Portuguese names. Although they make up about 2% of the population, they are socially elite and racially privileged group in the country. Historically, Mesticos formed social and cultural alliances with Portuguese colonists, subsequently identifying with the Portuguese over and above their indigenous identities. Now, because they were getting all of this, how can I sit up here and say, because they were more racially privileged and they were becoming the elite, other Africans would want to join on to this subculture of these Mestico people or these Portuguese people. You guys are going to find out why later on in my presentation, not dissertation. It's a presentation.
No, it's more of a clown ass performance.
So they would begin to identify over and above their own indigenous identities. Despite their loyalty, the ethnic group faced economic and political adversity at the hands of the white population during the times of economic hardship for whites. These actions led to ostracizing Mesticos from their inherited economic benefits, which sparked the group to take a new socio-political direction. However, since the 400-year Portuguese presence in the country, the ethnic group has retained their position of entitlement, which is highly evident in the political, economic, and cultural hierarchy in present-day Angola. Their phenotype range is broad, with a number of members possessing physical characteristics that are close to others within the indigenous black, non-mixed population. Let me repeat this. Their phenotype range is broad, with a number of members possessing physical characteristics that are close to others within the indigenous black, non-mixed population. Since the Mesticos are generally better educated than the rest of their indigenous black population, they exercise influence in government disproportionate to their numbers. So they're the elite. They're the 2% amongst their own people. This is one of the problems that we have in Africa today, because we've always allowed others to come in and influence us culturally, ethnically, and politically. Let's continue on. All right, so we're going to deal with the Luso-African identity because I'm...
Okay, well, since you want to do that, let me do something here. Let's look up this word Mumaluk, okay? Because this guy is ridiculous. Let's see what we get here. Mumaluk's definition, okay? Mumaluk. Mumalek, translated as one who is owned, meaning a slave, okay? Also translated as Mumaluk Mumluk, Mumluk, Mumaluk, 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 or Mumaluk, is a term most commonly referred to non-Arab, ethnically diverse, mostly Turkic, Caucasian, Eastern, and Southern European. I repeat, mostly Turkic, Caucasian, Caucasian, I repeat, Caucasian, Eastern and Southern European, Eastern and Southern European slave soldiers and freed slaves, to which were assigned military and administrative duties serving the ruling Arab dynasties in the Muslim world. How do they get dark skin out of that is beyond me, man. Okay, that was Wikipedia. Let's see what we have here in the Britannica. Okay, Mumluk, also spelled Mumluk, slave soldier and member of one of the armies of slaves established during the Abbasid, which is the black Muslims of Africa era, that later won political control over several Muslim states under the Ayyubid Sultanate. Mamluk generals used their powers to establish the dynasty that ruled Egypt and Syria from 1250 to 1517. The name is derived from the Arabic word for slave. These were black people slaving Europeans, Eastern and Southern Europeans. Okay? This is crazy. Let's look up definition for, some more definitions to see who's correct. A member of a powerful Egyptian military class occupying the Sultanate. These were the slaves who made them. They were military. They were the people that the Abbasids used to go into slavery. Okay, look right here. These people was not black folks. These people were white folks. The Mamluks were white folks. The Mamluks ruled Egypt and Syria after the fall of their Abbasid slave masters from 1250 to 1517, when their dynasties was extinguished by the Ottomans. But Mamluks had first appeared in the Abbasid Caliphate, like I just told you, in the 9th century. And even after the overflow of the Ottomans, they continued to form an important part of the Egyptian Islamic society and existed as an influential group until 19th century. Why is this brother bringing up Spanish people and indigenous Americans with this term and connecting it is beyond me. They is very much out of context as well. That's almost like calling a Chinese man or a Siberian man a Negro. They destroyed the Crusading kingdoms, talking about the Mamelukes of Outramir, and saved Syria, Egypt, and the holy places from Islam from the Mongols. All right. They made Cairo their dominant city of the Islamic world, and later in the Middle Ages they ruled these apparently unlettered soldiers. Statesmen ruled craftsmen, architecture, and scholarship flourished. Yet the dynasty remained virtually unknown to many of the Western world. Okay, so many of the Western world where Chris lives at don't even know much about him. This is the reason why he applies this word to the Western Hemisphere and it does not. Right here in this word, right here in this paragraph, it said the word Mamluk mean owned, and the Mamluks were not native to Egypt, meaning they were not black people, they were not Africans, but were always slave soldiers, mainly Chipchak Turks from Central Asia. These folks were white folks. In principle, though not always in practice, a Mamluk could not pass his property or title to his son because he was a slave. Indeed, sons were in theory indeed the opportunity to serve in Mumluk armies or regiments. So the group had to be constantly replenished from outside sources. The Bahri Mumluks were mainly natives to southern Russia, and the Burgi comprised chiefly of Circassians from the Caucasus. These were Caucasian people, as steppe people from the steppes of Europe and Asia and Caucasia. They had more in common with the Mongols than black people. What the fuck is you talking about, boy? Or Spanish or Spanish Portuguese people, or white Portuguese people, or Brazilians, Chris. Then with the people of Syria and Egypt, amongst whom they lived. And they kept their garrisons distinct, not mixing from the populace in the territories. The contemporary Arab historian Abu Shama noted after the Mamluk victories over the Mongols at Ain Jalut in 1260 that the people of the steppes had been destroyed by the people of the steppes, meaning these people pretty much destroyed themselves. These were white folks, Chris. Where this information at, we can punch through here. You're not going to find nothing in here that gives you the idea that these people were dark, tawny, or any of this shit. You know, that the information that you have is just flawed. Okay? Let's look at here. Let's look for what's going on over here at Oxford. At Oxford, what do the Oxford University Press, what they pushing out? Okay? Block that. What we got here? Quick reference: a regime controlled by slave soldiers, Mumluk meaning owned or slaved, that governed Egypt, Syria, southeastern Asia Minor, and western Arabia from 1250 to 1517. This doesn't tell us about their origin. It just told us about what they did. This is what we got here in the encyclopedia. It should tell us. Look down here. Uh, you got the Mumluks, okay, a military slave class which ruled from Egypt 1250 to 1517, and Syria, including Pakistan, from 1260 to 1516 under the Mamluk sultans of Egypt and Syria. The local Jews often suffered at the hand of the government officials of Muslim zealots, like the black Jews, or if you want to call them white, you can, suffered at the hands of the Mamluks, okay, because they were the Muslim zealots. Although at times the Sultan and his representatives were also restraining influence on fanatical mobs and leaders. This here doesn't tell us much about, okay, here we go right here. We can read where it talk about the Bahari period when the dominant groups were mainly composed of Chipchak Turks, and the Circassian period when Moonloops from the northern Caucasus, where it's really cold and white at, region were predominant, although Turks continued to play an important role. See that? These people from the Caucasus region, these were Caucasian people, Chris. And how you mix Moonloop with Mestico and black folks was just and black slaves, all because they were slaves. You try to tie that in, and that's ridiculous and it's stupid. Okay, let's get back and listen to some more stupid stuff you got to say here, because the stuff you say just doesn't goes into reality.
You guys to see where you guys begin to see this Jewish presence and how Africans begin to identify as Jews. We're gonna get there. Trust me, people. This is all out of line with who they really are. So let's deal with the Luso-African. Now, the Luso-Africans are people of mixed Portuguese and African ancestry who speak Portuguese. The vast majority of Luso-Africans live in former Portuguese Africa. Now,
health is not a sprint,
It's a marathon, Jen. And you know that. You got this. Nutrients for now referred to as Lusophone Africa, comprising the modern countries of Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Mozambique, where we find the Lembas at, Sao Tome, and Principe and Equatorial Guinea. A sizable number of Luso-Africans have also settled in Portugal, where they form a racial minority. This ethnic identity arose from the 16th century as primarily male Portuguese settlers, often known as Lacandos, settled in various parts of Africa, often marrying African women. But you Hebrews teach you are what your father is. So the children will begin to identify with their fathers. Now, if this is going on in the 16th century CE, you got 16, 17, 18, you got over 200 years.
What we as Hebrews today teach, and if we're not connected with the Hebrews of the past, what the hell do what we teach today got to do with what the people of the 1600s, irregardless of who they are, if we was not connected to them, teach? This shit is really crazy, Chris.
Of oral traditions teaching that they are Jews. Notice they never say that they are the tribe of Naplati or any other of those
Of
12
who? What
tribes.
the
They
fuck?
just say that we are Jews. You
Okay.
guys are going to find out later in my presentation what I mean by this. Now, in the 15th and 16th century, Portuguese traders settled in Cape Verde Islands and along the West African coast from Senegal to Sierra Leone. Now, I want to let everybody know the Portuguese had got there a lot earlier, as early as the 12th century BCE, I'm sorry, CE, or 13th century CE, excuse me, when King John the First was alive. Now, under King John the First, they had traveled there looking for gold because they had heard about the trade routes. You guys can go look into that history there, and they had established ports and they established their own little trading cities there along the coast of West Africa. This is where you get the Gold Coast from, etc. All right, so they had already been there. All right, but we're gonna find out a little bit more. This is the I just want to deal with this for a particular reason. That's why they're called traders, right? Now, in the 15th and 16th century, Portuguese traders settled in Cape Verde Islands and along the West African coast.
You mean Cape Verde, Chris? There's no such thing as a Verde. What's a Verde? It's not even spelt Verde. It's Cape Verde, Chris, since you like to correct people. Okay.
From Senegal to Sierra Leone. Descendants of these traders and of local African women formed the nucleus of the Luso-African community that soon developed a distinctive culture, joining elements of European and local African culture. These Luso-Africans, or Portuguese as they called themselves, were commercial middlemen, distinguished by their language, which was Portuguese and later on Ceruleo, architecture, and Christian religion. We're going to find out more about that. So now they're identifying with the people who have come and created settlements on their land. And they said they started identifying with them, the ones that mixed with the African women and the people who joined themselves onto them. They begin to
Bullshit.
mix with them and they begin to join themselves onto them with their architecture and Christian religion. This is how your history gets all twisted up, and people come talk proselytizing to you on these platforms, speaking about Christianity as an African tradition, or that you're a Jew, or if you're something like that. And rightfully so, because whenever they showed us pictures of West Africa, or maybe Africa in general, we was always in rattered and tattered clothing. They made it look like we were living in mud huts. My biggest problem with that is, so what? Embrace it. That's who we are. So what if we were in
Ridiculous.
mud huts? It's very ethnocentric of somebody to try and talk about us as if it wasn't good enough for us. Now, I'm not saying that's how our communities and our civilizations were, because
Yes, you
I do
is.
know that we are the mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, nieces, nephews, grandchildren of the greatest civilizations on earth. Two, I don't want to hear anybody
And you
else
saying
talking
that's how we
about
should
Egypt
be.
as if Egypt was the capital of Africa or as if it was the oldest
And that's
civilization
all
in
we
Africa.
worth.
It wasn't. It was a baby on the Nile. Just wanted to add that on in there for a little bit, okay? Now, let's not saying that it wasn't a great civilization.
Come
We
on,
got to
Chris,
begin to
hurry
look
up.
at our own civilizations and who we were also dealing with the west coast of Africa, because we're being very misinformed when it comes to this. And because of the misinformation that we have been informed with, we aren't able to embrace who these people are that are still there to this day and who are willing to embrace us and teach us who we are also over here in the diaspora. Okay, we have as I like to say, our own Holocaust that goes on to this day, and we need to start practicing reaching out to them so we can learn more about their culture, so we can find who we are. We don't need to look into Bronze Age documents anymore to find out who we are, especially when our people are still over there. Let's continue on.
All right. Now let's see out of all of that he said, how the fuck he got all of that out of this small two paragraphs is beyond me. All this paragraph is saying is Luso Africans are people of mixed Portuguese and African ancestry who speak Portuguese. The vast majority of Luso Africans live in former Portuguese Africa, now referred to as Lusophone Africa, comprising of modern countries as Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and Cape Verde, and Mozambique, that's in the south, and Sao Tome and Principe, and the Equatorial Guinea, and a sizable number of Lusos Africans have also settled in Portugal, where they form a racial minority. Okay, this ethnic minority arose from the 16th century as primarily male Portuguese settlers, meaning white folks, okay, often Lancandos settled in various parts of Africa, often marrying African women. Okay, but being that they were male settlers, they often called Lancandos. The Lancandos were usually the cast out. So 9 times out of 10, they were Christianized black Jews. Okay, because the Jews were black. Okay, they were Christianized black Jews. Okay, settled in various parts of Africa, often marrying, okay, African women because they were black people. In the 15th and 16th century, Portuguese traders settled in the Cape Verde Islands, and along with the West African from a coast from Senegal and Sierra Leone, descendants of these traders, which were all black folks, and the local African women formed the nucleus of the Luxo African community that soon developed in a distinctive culture, joining elements or European and local African culture. Now they talking about they joined this culture. They never did say that they joined not with one single white person. And when you look at the Luso Africans, don't none of them look like they got a drop of white anything in them because they're not white people, and they never was white people. And the history doesn't suggest or support that they were mixing and mating with white people. Okay, these Luso Africans, okay, black folks or Portuguese, as they called themselves, were commercial middlemen, distinguished by their language, Portuguese and later Creole, architecture, and Christian religion. As each of these characteristics should be shared, not skin colors, but characteristics, by members of the adjacent African community, identity transformations in both directions were relatively common, meaning that the Africans adopted the Judaisms and the Judaisms adopted the Africans. The Portuguese identity, the Portuguese identity remained both fluid and contextual, defined through the 17th century during the 18th and 19th century. However, Portuguese were drawn increasingly into a European discourse of identity because Portugal started with Europeans. Okay, one based upon the a priori characteristics, not skin color, primarily skin color. Excuse me, that is skin color. Based upon are primarily characteristics, primarily skin color, okay, forced to respond to the imposed identity. Okay, so basically these were black folks that was forced to impose, black Jews that was forced to impose to a Christian white identity. Luso-Africans continued to maintain that they were Portuguese now. However, that they also began to define themselves negatively by reference to what they were not, meaning that they had to define themselves by being European because they were not. They were defined calling themselves Portuguese, not Jew. I want y'all to see something that someone sent me earlier today. I'm going to go look off in the Facebook, see what we get here. Somebody sent me something in Facebook today, and I want to check it on out. I want you all to see something here. Let me get on out of here. Back on out of there. Go in here. Go in there. Go here. I just want y'all to see something. You know, how the way I read that, it was nothing and is what was there. And what was there was none of that shit that Chris had said. You know what I'm saying? Chris had written all of that garbage into it. And it wasn't, and none of that stuff was initially there. None of that stuff was there. Chris wrote, he can't read. He can't read. He can't comprehend. And then he want to blame it on other people that they can't read and that they can't comprehend. When all of the sources and all of everything goes against you. You know what I'm saying? You can't twist up all of the damn sources. Now, this is something that I was reading today from Afro-Portuguese Afropedia. Okay, look at this. Let's go over this information here. Okay, it says that the Afro-Portuguese are descendants of black Africans, Afro-Arabs, and Afro-Brazilians in Portugal. The number of blacks in Portugal is not reliable. Researchers have put a figure between 300,000 and 500,000. Others have put the figure higher. The government does not keep ethnic data, largely due to the notion of luso-tropicalism, an idea created by the Brazilian Gilberto Freire in the 1950s, which spread the idea that the Portuguese were better colonizers than the French, British, Belgium, and Dutch. Blacks brought to Portugal during the transatlantic slave trade never completely mixed with the broader Portuguese population and completely vanished, as in Spain. So the blacks that were brought to Spain never mixed in completely with the Spanish and the Portuguese population. I'll read that again. It said the blacks brought to Portugal during the transatlantic slave period never completely mixed with the broader Portuguese population and completely vanished as in Spain. Portugal had a continuous black population from the 15th century to the present. Portugal, during her imperial age, was unique in having the largest black population in Europe from the 1500s to the 1800s. Brazilians from the largest immigrant community. Afro-Portuguese come from the former African colonies, Angola, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Sao Tome, and Principe. Because citizenship is transferred from parent to parent. Jus sanguinis, the right of blood. African Portuguese are never citizens. Instead are viewed as nationalities living in Portugal, even if they are in the country for generations and knowing only Portuguese culture. Portugal and Spain were the only countries in Europe to allow slavery, on European soil during the transatlantic slave period. And we're looking at the history here. And right to the right, you got the timeline of the Afro-Portuguese history, going all the way back to Hamilcar Barca, which was one of the Moors, okay? Which is actually Hamilcar Barca is a very Hebrew name. You understand? They can't tell you what that word means in any other language. I can tell you exactly what that means in Hebrew. So he was a Hebrew. Okay, you got Hamilcar Barca and all that he had did down here and the treaties, and all of that good stuff. And then you got over here all historical jewels. Okay, then we go to the history here, which says early period. Portugal has always had blacks since written history. And before Portuguese even became a nation, they were with the Carthaginians. They were active in Roman society, meaning that these blacks was in Spain long before white people ever even got there. They were with the invading soldiers and amongst the residents of the Afro-Arab invasion. This is why I talk about those blacks that invaded Africa, the Sanhaja Berbers, which were known as the Black Jews, and how they, in their invasion, and how they, in their occupation of Iberia from 711 to 1250. And you got the Al-Andalus. Okay, for more information, you got the Afro-Arab, the Almoravid Empire, the Almohade Empire, and the Marinid Empire. So during the Afro-Arab Berber, Cordoba Caliphate, Almoravid, and Almohade conquest, Berbers were major components of the troops that occupied Spain. By 720, all of Iberia was under Islamic control. Cordoba became the capital of the Islamic regime. Al-Andalus became a thriving, prosperous, and intellectually prosperous region. It was one of the most cosmopolitan places in all of Europe, meaning that there was a lot of different races and a lot of different people there. Okay, individuals of many different religions reside in the territory. Jews and Christians walked her streets. Slaves were of all races. White slaves from Frankish, Gallic, and Slavic regions. There go your Mamelukes. Black slaves from Africa. Black and mulatto slave wives, or Deriviers, existed. Some blacks made a name for themselves, like Abu al-Hassan al-Ibn Nafi or Zariyab from 789 to 857. Zariyab made a name for himself as a trendsetter, introducing toothpaste and underarm deodorant and wearing of seasonal clothing, hairstyles, the clean-shaven look. He introduced the eating of asparagus and Iraqi cuisine in Al-Andalus. Numerous recipes bear his name. He made the drinking of wine acceptable. Ishraq ad-Sawiyada, a black female, was well known for her knowledge of prosody and grammar. This is some good information. By 1094, Al-Andalus was incorporated in the Berber Almoravid Empire. The Almoravid army was constituted of many black troops. The Almoravid and later the Almohade printed a much recognized dinar supply with gold from the Sahara. These are all African kingdoms we're talking about, not one white European in it. And the Christian kingdom of Spain took much of the Almohade territory. Then we got the kingdom of Portugal. The black population took off with the establishment of plantation slavery by Portugal in the Azores, Madeira, and in Brazil, Sao Tome, Principe, and Cape Verde. In 1444, the Portuguese engaged in slave raiding along the Senegal River, Guyana coast, and in Congo. They would later establish ports and transport African victims to their colonies. Some slaves were destined to Portugal. By the 1500s, the black population increased due to slavery. In the 1600s, the population of Lisbon and Algarve was reported at 10%. Blacks began to organize themselves into confraternities for self-help and to continue customs and traditions from Africa. This is a total opposition to everything Christopher said. During Portuguese festivals, Africans would wear their traditional clothing reflective of their ancestral homelands. This could only be so if these Portuguese, which were Jews, the converts, which were slaves, that were the people that was kicked out due to the Alhambra decree, due to the people that were kicked out during the Spanish Inquisition, which were all black Jews. It was Jews that was kicked out during the Spanish Inquisition, okay, not Christians and not white Portuguese, like Christians lying to y'all to believe. And he talked about the slavery here. Every echelon of Portuguese society owned slaves. Which meaning the religious people, the aristocracy, and the commoner. Slaves were expensive and typically owned by the aristocracy, meaning the rich people and the people that were in government. Only the government retained large numbers of slaves. It was rare to have commoners owning slaves. Excuse me. So they try to make it like the black slavery was just dominant all over the damn place. You know what I'm saying? And that just blacks just didn't have a chance in hell. When slaves were actually making it to become rich and prosperous people inside of the Portuguese and the Spanish regime, which were black folks. See, these people, Chris, don't know what the hell he's talking about. Slaves were used for many purposes. The aristocracy used them as domestic servants. Some were hired out to perform duties for free. They were used for dangerous jobs, such as the hospitals during epidemics. Slaves could be set free. Some slaves brought their own freedom by way of payments from their labor. Other slaves were set free by their masters. If a black woman birthed her owner's child, the child typically be freed by the father. So what the hell is Chris talking about here? Chris Harris is a retard. Escaped slaves were a rare thing because the slavery over in Spain and Portugal was nothing like the slavery here in America. Like they're trying to do. They're trying to look at history through the brutality that occurred here in America. And I'm here to tell you, not one Portuguese fed you to the damn sharks like the Anglo-Saxon and the European British did. Okay? Slaves would escape to Seville, where they would receive assistance. Black slaves were especially trusted because of their black skin. North African slaves would hide and blend in, not a black slave. Slaves who run away faced punishment of the pigamento, the pouring out of hot lard on their back. This was a rare punishment since the slaves was an expensive object, not to be damaged, almost like a beans, okay? Punishment was typically lashed, meaning they got beat. Slaves would not trust the white population, who would return them to their master for a bounty. Free blacks. The free black population also existed. They were employed as sailors on ships and sailed along the African west coast. Free blacks were the majority of ferrymen on the Tagus River. Black women were street vendors selling food. Although they were free blacks led a life amongst the same as being in bondage. They were banned from most of the trade guilds, clergy, and competed with slaves and poor whites for jobs. And so the free slave wasn't that much different. He still was oppressed with principles like limpeza de sangue, purity of blood. Free blacks could be discriminated on anything, especially a job. In 1822, Portugal was pressured by Britain to end the slave trade. Out of pressure from slave-holding regions like Alentejo and Algarve, slavery did not end until 1877. Portugal, up till this time, had a large black population in Europe, with emancipation, the black population in Portugal became non-existent in the mind of the Portuguese government. A large underclass of black and mulatto occupied Lisbon. Black women were banned from selling their grocery and foodstuff from the local markets, a traditional source of income. Black immigration from Portugal was very restrictive until the administration of Oliveira Salazar gave equal status to Portuguese colony. Migration from the colonies increased, but jobs and opportunities proved very scarce. Many blacks moved to other European countries. The contributions. Black left certain imprints on Portuguese culture. Black character were used in theaters and in theatrical language called fala de negro, which is black talk, was utilized extensively in Portuguese theater and exported to Spain. Black comic caricature were used during intermissions between one act. Blacks left imprints on the music of the Renaissance in Portugal and Spain in terms of instrumentation, methodology, and rhythm. The fola, an Afro-Brazilian dance, was popular in Portugal. The Portuguese fado, a national musical composition in Portugal, was initially influenced by the Afro-Brazilian music. The current status, xenophobia in Portuguese society was very rampant. This has resulted in profiling of a lot of black Portuguese. The issue of citizenship for Afro-Portuguese is a recurring theme, especially now with the Portuguese population looking towards Africa as a destination of opportunity. Portugal's citizenship law are based on the jus sanguinis, which is the right of blood. Citizenship is transferred from parent to child. Many Afro-Portuguese who have lived in the country for generations and only know Portuguese culture are not viewed as Portuguese citizens or even Portuguese, but viewed as the nationality of origin Angolan, Brazilian, Cape Verdean, for example. They may speak of the Portuguese accent and not with an African or Brazilian accent, completely acculturated with Portuguese society and never viewed to be officially a part of the society. And this is what Chris has done. Chris has done this very same thing right here. He speak of the Portuguese people. You know what I'm saying? As a people completely acculturated to Portuguese society and never really viewed as Africans. You know what I'm saying? And that's what he has done. He has taken them all because of their relationship, their culture, to Portuguese and being long disenfranchised from Africa. He is playing on that with y'all and lying to you people about history. And that being that, Yashib in Israel is out of here. Chris, you a liar.